Hey everybody, I'm Brian Fitzy. It's Wednesday, which means it's building blocks time. So I thought this week I would talk about setting up a mixer. This is a really simple mixer from Behringer. It's a pretty old unit, but tons of common ground between this and what the current products look like. And at its core, it is a mixer just like every other mixer. So the same fundamental rules and logic apply here. This mixer is really basic. We've just got two XLR inputs. These are balanced connectors that you're going to use a microphone cable to run into. And then we have unbalanced connectors here. We also have some RCA jacks. So we've got these XLRs, quarter-inch jacks, and then we've got our RCAs. There is really no fundamental difference at all between the RCA connectors and the quarter-inch connectors. They've just got a hot and a ground. That's it. So you've got like the shield bit and then the tip. The XLR cables have three different conductors, which is the reason they are balanced connectors, whereas the quarter-inch and RCA are considered unbalanced connectors. There are major benefits with a balanced connection, but that is an entirely separate tangent we can go off on. So if you're curious more about the differences between an unbalanced and a balanced signal, that is a question for Google and totally worth your time if you are not already aware. So this mixer is really straightforward. Each channel has an EQ section. It also has on this mixer a send and a return for a it's a return, send and return for a effect channel, which you're able to patch in up here. You've got an effect send, which is just a mono out. This actually might be a stereo output. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure this is a stereo output, so it's going to have two rings, which would actually make it a balanced connector, just like the mic inputs. And then you've got returns, so you've got a left and a right. So if you have a stereo effect that you're pushing a signal out to, you can bring that effect back in, that wet signal, back into the mixer right here with these jacks. So we have an amount that that effect is blended in. That's what's known as the effect return. That's going to be a master level here. And then we have how much we're actually going to send to the effect unit. And that's what we're going to be doing with these little knobs here. In addition, we've got a pan knob, which is going to allow you to change the position in the stereo field to the left or to the right. And when it's dead center, the audio is dead center in the stereo field. We've also got a level control. Now, there's differences here. You have level or volume. You also have gain. On a mixer like this, and most mixers are going to have this, when you're talking a microphone input, you're also going to have a gain pot. The gain pot, or potentiometer, is what steps up the energy, adds all that extra voltage to the signal, so you can then control it much more finely here. A big thing that you need to think about is a thing called gain structure. So an example of that would be, of good gain structure, would be you'd set this fader or knob top dead center, which means right at 0, which is right up and down the middle, and adjust the gain until you had a really strong signal, not distorted, not too weak, just right with the gain. And then you can, after that, you can adjust where it sits in the mix with the fader, or in this case, this pot, this little level control. Bad gain structure would be turning the gain up to just a little bit where you have kind of a weak signal and then having to crank the level, which feeds the master. That's just not good. It's going to do bad things. You're not going to have a very strong signal. In fact, you'll have more noise than you want in the signal there too. So establishing good gain structure is really, really, really important when using a mixer. If you're not getting good results out of any mixer, there's a good chance that your gain structure is not good. So you want to come back and revisit that and figure out if that is your problem. The EQ section is really simple. You've got lows, mids, and highs. These allow you to shape the sound a lot more further than what you're getting initially. So with a microphone especially, if I had a lot of mud sounding, a really muddy sounding signal, I'd probably want to boost a little bit of the high frequency and cut out some of the mids and cut out some of the lows. I might want to get rid of all the lows if there's like a lot of wind noise or a lot of plosive sounds like that sort of thing. Getting rid of the low frequency would be a great starting point for that. Some mixers are going to have a feature that is called a high pass filter that actually slopes off the low frequency and then just lets everything above a certain cutoff through. Everything below that cutoff gets squashed down in a linear fashion between that cutoff and 0 hertz. So, unless the circuit design is a little bit different, but that is conventionally how it's done. So it's not just a cliff that you fall off the edge of. So all these channels, when they're set up, feed a master section. So what you want to do, typically with a mixer when you're setting it up, hook up your output sources. So these might be a set of small studio speakers or a PA system, whatever you've got. Plug those speakers into whatever kind of outputs you have. This only has 1/4-inch outs. Pro audio mixers are going to have XLR outs for your sends and your master outs. Any of your outputs, period, are going to be balanced connectors. So if they're not XLR, they're going to be balanced. These are unbalanced 1/4-inch connectors. So you hook up into these and then set your master level to 0, the top dead center point. On every single mixer, whether you have a knob, a pot here, or you have a fader, there is going to be a 0 line. Above that is usually not a place you want to be pushing your faders into. You want to try to establish a great gain structure and have a great relationship between all of the all the channels here before it hits here. You don't want to be reaching and constantly having to peg these all the way up. That's not a great approach to creating a gain structure or creating a mix before it hits this master. But a great thing to do would be to set this top dead center to the 0 mark and then gradually bring your signals up until they're sitting in a good place. On a mixer as simple as this, you don't have the ability to group channels or do anything like that. So literally, you're going to just set your levels right here for these independently. This mixer has a couple other options on it where it allows you to send an unbalanced line level signal out with these RCA jacks. So in the event that you wanted to get old school and record to a cassette tape or cassette deck, or if you had a really simple audio interface on your computer and you wanted to get just a left-right mix out of it into this, cool. There are also cables that you could get that you could plug into this and then with an adapter hook it into your phone. We've also got a tape input, which is going to be a whole separate input section. Typically, that's just going to go, you have an option here to send it either to the mix or to the control room, and that's on this mixer in particular, you've got phones and control room sent to its own pot, which actually goes out of both headphone jack or control room out. So we've got like a variety of different connections here, and the I/O in the mixer, the inputs and outputs, is something you should familiarize yourself with as much as possible. That way, when you go to hook up your devices, you have a sense of what can go where. This mixer really does the job for the majority of things. Final overview on it is that you've got one extra feature here that I didn't touch on before, and that is phantom power. So if you've got a microphone that requires what's called phantom power, which is an extra 24 or 48 volts on the mic line, you'd want to turn that switch on, and it's going to add that extra voltage there to step it up. Condenser microphones are almost always going to require that, unless they have an external power source that supplies that voltage to the microphone before it gets to the mixer. That's where you're going to need to do it. You don't need to use phantom power for the majority of your dynamic microphones. Those microphones get enough voltage from the preamp circuit on its own. So it's pretty straightforward. But that is the basics of at least what's where on a mixer, and most of that does carry over. The more developed mixers you're going to have are going to have much more in-depth analog equalizing sections. The equalizers are going to have more than just highs, mids, and lows. You're going to have the ability to really tailor each frequency band, what the highs or the mids or the lows pot controls, what frequency it's centering around. And then obviously if you're talking about a digital mixer, which there are a ton of on the market now, and I would strongly recommend, honestly at this point, over an analog board for doing stuff like front of house or rehearsals or anything. So much can be controlled with a smartphone now. You're going to have way more power for your dollar than you will with an analog board. If you think about a digital mixer, it's going to just have the I/O. It doesn't need anything else. So the physical manufacturing cost of materials, etc., is way lower. So you have this extra money then that's essentially liquid in the manufacturing process that can go towards the digital world, the processing. And granted, that stuff does come in at a price tag as well, but when you're only paying for just the inputs and outputs, and all the processing gets done, so all the EQ, the gain, everything gets done and controlled by a microcontroller, it's going to take up a lot less space, and it's going to easily have a lot more functionality. So there are definite differences there, but all the same rules apply from using an analog mixer like this over to using a digital board, or using really any size analog board, whether it's a little tiny portable thing like this or a full-size console. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments. I'll try to answer them. And also let me know what you want to see me cover next week. I am always trying to think of something that's different than what I did the week before and try to throw you some curveballs and cover all kinds of different topics. I don't know where you guys are as an audience and individual viewers in your journey in the music world, if you have tons of experience or if you have very little. And there's always something out there that you can learn. So I'd like to help you guys maybe skip over a couple of steps and making mistakes if I can. I'll see you next week for Building Blocks. My name is Brian Fitzy. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Wednesday at noon. Cheers.